5.
Good evening. I'm calling the regular meeting of the University Place City Council for Monday, July 19th, 2021 to order. We are conducting our meeting remotely in compliance with the special Open Public Meeting Act rules issued by Governor Inslee's emergency order. Reminder to the public, participation in public comments portion of this meeting will continue to be accepted via email, and comments received after 5:30 deadline will be electronically provided to the City Council for their consideration. And subject to technological limitations, the Council will also accept telephonic comments. Members of the public can call 1-509-342-7253, conference ID 431-179-870#. For those calling in, please be advised that calls will be taken in the order they are received. May I please have roll call?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Figueroa.
Councilmember Figueroa present.
Councilmember Keel.
Councilmember Keel present.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee present.
Councilmember McCluskey.
Councilmember McCluskey present.
Councilmember Fleming. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington present.
Mayor Belisi.
Mayor Belisi here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. May I call for a motion to excuse Councilmember Fleming for this evening's meeting?
Mayor Belisi, this is Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, and I move that we excuse Councilmember Fleming from this evening's meeting.
Do I have a second?
Councilmember Keel, I second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Is there any opposition to excusing Councilmember Fleming at this time? Okay, not seeing any. We have a unanimous motion. At this time, I'd like to ask Mayor Pro Tem Worthington to lead us in Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. It'd be my honor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. At this time, the next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda as provided. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Mayor Belisi, Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, and yes, I move for the approval of the agenda as provided.
Okay, I have a first. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Keel, I second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Are there any objections to approving the agenda as provided? Okay, hearing none, the approval of the agenda passes unanimously. Our next item is the public comment section. As of 5:30 this evening, we had not received any public comments via email. However, as a reminder to our citizens or those that are potentially listening to this, you still have an opportunity to call. So for members of the public who wish to provide comments at this time, you can do so by calling our line at 1-509-342-7253, conference ID 431-179-870#. Provide a moment here to see if anybody is watching that would like to provide some public comment before I close this section of the agenda. Okay, there has been no attempts made to call in at this time, so I go on to our next item, which is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve or amend the consent agenda as proposed?
Yes, Mayor Belisi, Steve Worthington, Mayor Pro Tem, and I move for the approval of the consent agenda as distributed.
Okay, I have a first. Do I have a second?
Second, Councilmember Keel.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Are there any objections to approving the consent agenda as provided? Okay, not hearing anything. The consent agenda is approved unanimously. Thank you. Our next item is our public hearing. We have the 6-year transportation improvement plan. We had this as a previous study session at our last meeting, and this is a yearly update that we are required to do for state statute. And this evening it is up for a public hearing. So at this time, I'd like to call our Director of Engineering, Jack Eklund, forward to provide the staff report on this item. Mr. Eklund.
Dang it.
Isn't technology wonderful until you need it?
But he's an engineer.
Okay, Mr. Eklund, you are muted. There you go.
I don't know. I think it's still muted.
No, you're not.
Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council. As you mentioned, tonight we have for public hearing and consideration the annual update to the city's 6-year transportation improvement plan. One thing I do want to say, the thing of embarrassment, I was out last week and actually I'm a little bit under the weather today, and so I was not as diligent at checking the documents, and somehow the council, so all in the council packet you have, everything is correct except for the council bill itself. And somehow last year's council bill got put into your packet. And so I will, I can read what the current one will be, but I will provide a replacement council bill to the city clerk when we are, following the meeting here. But anyway, so that being said, the city is required annually to update our, by state law, to annually update a 6-year transportation improvement plan. And this plan itself covers the years of 2022 to 2027. The primary changes to this, sorry, I'm working here from home. The primary changes to this year's is, oh, goodness gracious, I apologize. Here we go. The 4 projects have been removed. The Cirque Drive Phase 3 project, which was completed, the Larson Lane North project, which was completed, the Alameda Extension project, which we awarded earlier last month, the Larson Lane South Phase 1 project was also removed, which is currently under construction by a developer. In addition, Project 8, which is the 38th Street West improvements, has been added to the construction of the, for the construction of the new roadway that's planned between the Town Center Lot 1 and Homestead Park. And then in addition, funding statuses have been updated to reflect the various recent grant awards that we have, and project schedules and costs have also been updated. Sorry. So I do want to remind that approval of the 6-year transportation plan does not commit the city to any financial expenditures. Rather, each project will be reviewed individually by the city council in each relevant budget cycle as a component of the capital improvement plan. Approval of the 6-year transportation plan, however, does create eligibility for the city to apply for various grant opportunities. Many grant funding sources require a project in question to appear in the city's TIP. In addition, the TIP provides an indication to other jurisdictions of the city's planning direction for our transportation needs. With that, I recommend adopting the attached resolution, which is correct, adopting the 6-year transportation improvement plan for the years 2022 to 2027.
Okay, you had stated earlier that the resolution needed to be updated. Now you're saying,
No, that the council bill is incorrect. The resolution is correct in the council packet.
okay,
The content of the council bill, or the same, basically the only thing that's not correct in the council bill is what the changes were, which are actually reflected in the memo that was attached to the council bill, which is correct.
all right. This is a public hearing, so that we are opening it up at this time for any public comment. We have not received emails pertaining to this topic this evening. However, I do want to remind the public that is listening that you still have an opportunity to call in for this, to provide some public comment at this time. So for those members of the public who wish to provide comments at this time, you can do so by calling 1-509-342-7253, conference ID 431-179-870#. And I'll provide a moment here to, if there's anybody listening that would like to provide some public comment, to be able to call in. Okay, there does not appear to be anybody at this time that is attempting to call in, so I will close the public comment section and open it for council consideration. Do I have a motion for consideration?
Yes, Mayor Belisi, this is Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, and I move for adoption of the ordinance as provided in our packet.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second, Councilmember Keel.
All right, I have a first and a second. So at this time, are there any council members that have any comments or questions at this time? Council Member Keel.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Jack, thank you, I think, for your presentation. The question though I have is that there's a lot of talk about infrastructure money, state level, federal level. Well, the federal level, if they can get their act together to give us the money. The state level, they're talking about new transportation packages and different kind of issues around gas taxes and collecting money and paying for all this stuff. Any thought your team given to how those will impact us as a city and how we might be able to leverage some of that stuff and maybe change or modify our tip so it isn't because last year's we just changed the dates on them and took out the projects we made and move it forward.
Yeah, we do develop the tip as kind of a broad, kind of a wide net to try to catch any project that we would like to see eventually happen. However, we do have the ability, if something were to come down the pike that had some slight changes, we have the ability to amend the tip relatively quickly. And we have done that in the past. And so that would be kind of a strategy. If we needed to act quickly, we would be in a position to do so. However, I think for the probably 90% of anything that we could think of would be covered. It would only be maybe phasing or something else would be split out, as if something, it'd be the only thing that we wouldn't, that's typically what happens if we were to do a amendment, is to, let's say we could get part of a project or combine a couple or something like that.
Yeah. So, but no thought as to trying to look around a corner or, down the road as to what people are talking about at both at the other Washington and how we could leverage on some of our down the road projects. I don't know if it's, I'm thinking about, paving every street in the city or, that type of thing. We talked about that before. I'm just wondering if there's any talk recently.
Yeah, and so I haven't heard a lot right now. The different groups are there hasn't been a lot of information out of the state and feds of exactly what they expect. And so the information has been fairly stingy from that regard. But I do feel pretty confident, at least from our 6-year tip standpoint, that we should be well positioned with it. Hopefully, go after some funds that come our way.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Figueroa, you raised your hand.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to comment on staff, and in particular with Jack, on staying on top of our projects. It's a big deal to stay on top of them, stay on top of getting the grants to go along as we go through our 6-year plan. And I know that sometimes efforts like that go unnoticed, but for our city in need of so much infrastructure and projects that need to get done, you certainly do a very good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Any other council comments at this time or questions? Okay. City Clerk, can you please conduct a roll call vote?
Councilmember Figueroa,
Councilmember Figueroa, aye.
Councilmember Keel, Councilmember Keel. I think you're muted, Councilmember. Councilmember Pro Tem Lee,
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, aye.
Councilmember McCluskey,
Councilmember McCluskey, aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington,
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, aye.
Mayor Belisi.
Mayor Belisi, aye.
The motion carries.
Aye.
Councilmember Keel is back.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we are on to our next item, which is council consideration. It's the Alameda Drive designation. We discussed this in a study session at our last meeting. This is an opportunity for us to review it again and have it for our consideration this evening. So I will ask our Director of Engineering, Jack Eklund, to come forward and present the staff report on this item.
Thank you again, Madam Mayor and City Council. As you mentioned, we have for your consideration the ordinance proposing to rename portions of Alameda Avenue as well as 62nd Street West between Cirque Drive and 67th Avenue to Alameda Drive West. The city recently awarded the Alameda Extension Project, which will construct a new segment of roadway of Alameda between where it currently ends, where Alameda currently ends at 62nd Street West and or at 62nd Avenue West, and where 62nd Street West ends at 64th Street West. And Amanda, do you have that map that you could bring up that maybe would help this illustrate the?
Give me just 1 second, Jack.
Wait. So. Anyway, so this new stretch of roadway right now, it does curve going, starts off going north-south, ending going east-west. It makes sense to consistency, rename it to be one name for the roadway. The Alameda Avenue, as we mentioned in our study session, does actually exist along the extension of, let's see, looks like something coming up. The extension of where Alameda currently is over in that neighborhood kind of behind the Meadow Park Golf Course. Okay, so you can see this shows the area where we are, what we're looking at. So you can see that there's a section that's right now called Alameda Avenue. So if you see it up top, the roundabout will orient you to where Cirque Drive is. And then we have an area down kind of in the middle that's, or near the bottom, that says Alameda Extension Area. That's the portion of the road that's being constructed. And then you can see as you get closer to, as it kind of turns the corner down the bottom, 62nd Street is the portion down by 67th Avenue. So, and then off to the right, you can see there is an existing Alameda Avenue over by that Meadow Park Golf Course neighborhood. So what we are proposing is to rename this segment of roadway to Alameda Drive. One reason for that to call it Drive is to, obviously we don't want to have confusion with the existing street down to the right there, but also avenues are generally in our city run north and south, where this street will both run north and south and east and west. And so so generally streets run east-west, avenues run north-south. A drive doesn't have such convention, and so that makes sense to rename this to Drive. One of the things that came up during the study session is Councilmember Fleming wanted us to inquire with City of Fircrest if they'd be interested in renaming the segment, kind of the entire segment to Alameda Drive for consistency. But I talked with them and they didn't see a benefit to them to change it to Alameda Drive for their residents. Also, in this stretch of road where we would be putting it, propose to change it to Alameda Drive, there are no people directly addressed off of it. And so it wouldn't impact any personal addresses by this naming designation. So our recommendation is to confine the renaming just between Cirque Drive and 67th Avenue. Now, to do so, there is an ordinance that needs to be passed. And in the ordinance, it has a couple parts. The first part is just designating the new names. And then the second section is we do have to modify a segment of our municipal code that talks about the name of our street classifications. So it's also a code modification because we'd be clarifying and revising the names from Alameda Avenue in this segment to Alameda Drive. So that's the two portions attached in the attached ordinance. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Eklund. At this time, this is open for public comment. We did not receive any email input as of 5:30 this evening. However, if there are any citizens that are currently watching this meeting live and would like to comment, your opportunity is still available to do so. So if you wish to provide comment at this time, you can do so by calling 1-509-342-7253, conference ID 431-179-870#. I will provide a moment here to see if anybody that is watching wants to comment. Okay, I don't see anybody attempting to call in at this time, so I will close the public comment section of this this item and ask for a motion for the ordinance, please.
Mayor Bellisi, this is Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, and I move for the adoption of the ordinance providing for renaming to Alameda Drive.
I have a first. Do I have a second?
Councilmember Keel, I second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. We are now open for council comments and questions. Do we have any comments or questions at this time? Council Member Keel, you raised your hand, followed by Mayor Pro Tem Worthington.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Jack, could you remind me again the timing for when that new road to make Alameda go all the way through?
Yeah, so right now we have awarded the contract, but we're in the material procurement stage, and these days it's taking a little longer to get materials. And some of the first orders of work for the project will be both building a retaining wall on one side and also putting in a infiltration detention storm drainage facility, underground tanks. And both of those have had some lead time. So we're anticipating receiving those in maybe late August, and then weather dependent. We hope to have it done by the end of the year. However, it's possible it could go into the springtime if the weather gets too cold for paving.
Right. And who owns that property that streeted property right now when the street goes in?
It's city right away.
The street is, but on the
Yeah.
side of the street, who's all that whole area is also right away?
And then well, it goes through, it kind of bisects the Harvest Ridge residential development. So it's between the Harvest Ridge phase 1 and phase 2 residential developments.
So whatever developer owns those developments are the ones that own the property. I'm trying to drive at. Eventually, there could be homes on the side of the road where the street is going.
Actually, the developments are fully developed. Amanda, I don't know if you could bring back that map. The only other there is a portion that's undeveloped, not by the part we're building, but on the segment between Cirque and where our new construction is. However, that's all city-owned park property and wetland. So it's all encumbered wetlands. So there's not a lot of potential for future development along the street, other than our own, I guess, park.
Okay. So the Leech Creek Park, we own that obviously, and then and I see there's some homes.
Yeah. So the area that you see, it looks like it's undeveloped just to the north of this. It's a kind of big area, but that's a big hillside. And so that's not developable land.
Okay.
That area is partially owned by us, partially by the homeowner association.
Okay. And then there's some other undeveloped stuff down a little bit toward the south, right above that second area where it says the extension area.
Yeah.
That goes perpendicular.
Yeah, so there might be some of that I don't remember on the slope of that, but there is a potential for some development there, I suppose, like houses, maybe single houses.
Yeah. Okay. And then that 67th, it actually does come out to Cirque, right? I mean, 62nd Street West already touches 67th Avenue West right now, right? And
yep.
But it dead ends today.
Yeah. And right now, like one of the like the Harvest Ridge Homeowner Association had actually requested us to escalate this project in our plans because they get quite a few folks that drive down Alameda right now and then go through their private street networks. And so and also they've had some issues of people kind of running down the street and then be surprised that there's not a street anymore, and then they have crashed into their fences a couple times. Right. And so this has been a project that the nearby residential properties have been asking for a while as well.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, you raised your hand.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Mayor Belize. And so just a couple of questions, Jack. First off, do any of our neighboring jurisdictions, and I'm really talking about Lakewood, does Lakewood use Alameda in their street system as a name?
No, the only streets. Well, I don't know honestly if potentially it goes down as far as Lakewood. I haven't seen it. It doesn't extend. I know certainly Fircrest does, and then once it goes out of Fircrest, it's called Pearl Street in Tacoma, and so Tacoma doesn't use it. If Lakewood has it, it's possible that would it be an isolated street, potentially in the somewhere in the alignment, but I haven't seen that before, and it'd be quite a bit south probably.
Okay, good. Just wanted to check in on that, and it's not likely. And while admittedly it's not, we don't know it as a fact. It's just not likely at this point. Chances are we'd be aware of it. But all right, is there anything about this that is inconsistent with whatever our street system is in the comp plan? Is there anything inconsistent with the adopted comp plan related to this? Great.
No, and certainly the comp plan has been, getting the roadway connected has been a goal of the comp plan.
Mhm.
I don't believe the comp plan has referred to it as Alameda Drive before, but it was. I know our building department had specifically brought up the concern of if we were to name it Alameda Avenue, then we would have two segments of Alameda Avenue on the same grid line.
Yeah, okay. And Drive offers a little more flexibility, though it strikes me that there's some naming convention, though not in the city's naming convention, but in the broader sense of how drives are used. And I somehow was thinking they were associated with private streets, but I easily could be wrong. So there's somewhere in the universe, there is this keeper of the master addressing system for Pierce County, and I assume we've ran it through them by now, so to be in front of us, so we've got that working for us. And then, how many folks are affected by Alameda West in terms of changing their address? There looks like there's some homes there. I couldn't quite tell how many.
So under this proposal, we wouldn't be impacting anyone with direct addresses on Alameda. So there's nobody actually that has a Alameda Avenue address.
But I was asking about Alameda West.
The other segment, if we were to change it the other way around, I believe there's about a half a dozen homes probably.
Okay. All right. And so and currently that is named Alameda West, or what is that called? Or maybe I'm confused.
It's Alameda Avenue West. It's basically, when years and years ago, they just drew straight grid lines, and it's the extension of what the Alameda is when it's on the other side of Cirque, if it were to drawn straight down.
Yeah. All right, and then so currently it's Alameda Avenue West, and this would change it to just Alameda West. Was that what happened?
That one we wouldn't change that. We're not proposing to change that street at all. That one,
okay.
Because we didn't want to modify anybody's address.
Thank you. That sounds even better. Like that better. I saw it on the map, and for some reason I thought there was a name change. My mistake, but glad to have the clarity. So we're really just talking about Alameda moving to Drive, and thank you. That answers all my questions. I don't see any issues with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Figueroa, you had your hand up. Are you still wanting to comment?
No, thank you.
Okay. Are there any other comments from council? Questions from council? Okay, not hearing any. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Figueroa,
Councilmember Figueroa, aye.
Councilmember Keel,
Councilmember Keel, aye.
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee,
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, aye.
Councilmember McCluskey,
Councilmember McCluskey, aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington,
Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, aye.
Mayor Belisi.
Mayor Belisi, aye.
The motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Eklund.
Thank you.
At this time, we are moving on to our city manager report. May I ask Mr. Steve Sugg to come forward and present the city manager report at this time? Mr. Sugg, I think you might be muted. Okay, I will give him a few minutes. He might be having some technological issues, so I will move on to the council comments and report outs while we wait for Mr. Sugg. Councilmember Figueroa, do you have any comments or report outs at this time?
Well, Mayor, thank you. And I do have one comment, and I would like to, whoever has a pet barking, to either mute their microphone or take care of the issue. It is very unprofessional and disturbing to have to listen to that while I'm listening to others talk.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Keel, do you have any report outs or questions at this time or comments?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just one thing about just to report to status on the Sound Transit's work on the realignment. This week, the board's going to roll out a a plan for realignment. If you've been paying attention to the newspaper and that there's just been this big back and forth about how to make up the $8 billion gap. And I've had a proposal out there to how to do that. And then I've had some discussions with my King County colleagues and Seattle mayor colleagues about doing something different. We couldn't agree on that, and we've been talking about some compromise. So I think we're very close to a compromise. The good news for citizens in Pierce County is that all the things that I believe that we need to do to make sure that Pierce County is whole and that we're not spending money that we don't have is in this proposal, still in this proposal. So there's just some work coming out, and I'll report hopefully positively when we take that vote in August. But the first step before we vote is we got to have a proposal for people to consider, an official proposal, and that's coming out on Thursday. So,
Okay, is that all?
Yeah, that's it. Nothing
All right.
from AWC at this point in time.
Okay, I see that Mr. Sugg has joined us, so I will pause our council comments at this time to get the city manager report. Good evening, Mr. Sugg.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I apologize. The technical difficulties came just in time for my report. So I'm back on, and everything seems to be working. So a couple items. National Night Out is scheduled for Tuesday, August 3rd. It didn't happen last year because of COVID, and we missed it because it has been running since 1998, our very first year, when we had just 3 neighborhoods along 70th Avenue in the area where our old police headquarters used to be. It's since expanded to it's been upwards of 45 neighborhoods this year. There's 27 neighborhoods registered. Friday is the registration deadline. And you can go to the city's website, cityaup.com. It's got information, and it can tell you how to register. Jennifer Hales, our public safety administrator, is the coordinator for this, as she has been in the past years. We have, it is, by the way, National Night Out, just a few factoids. National Night Out's always the first Tuesday of August. So for those out there in the neighborhoods, mark your calendars. We will be out with the police, our police officers, and with our firefighting partners at West Pierce Fire, visiting neighborhoods, and it's meant to heighten crime and drug prevention awareness, strengthen neighborhood spirit, and police community partnerships. So we will be caravanning with police vehicles and fire vehicles to the neighborhoods that register. And again, registration deadline is this Friday and hopefully we see some more neighborhoods, but understand coming out of a quarantine year, it might be a little light this year, but so far 27. So I'm going to ask Amanda to put up this next graphic, which is the 2021 Chip Seal program, which is set to kick off on the week of July 29th through the 31st. This is there's 7.7 miles of neighborhood streets that will be surfaced with a chip and slurry seal. And it's thanks to the council's approval in the budget for this year. We have we're going to surface all close to 8 miles of streets. As is always our standard procedure, we will be delivering door hangers in the project area 1 week prior to the event and to the chip sealing. And we'll also be placing reminder signage on the streets 24 hours prior to let folks know. Also the door hangers will have the Public Works shop contact info for anyone that has a question. They can call the shop and get their question answered. So very excited about that, and you'll be seeing some activity again July 29th through the 31st, and we have a contract with the county that does that. Also, just one final note for everyone. This probably doesn't need even mention, but there's a burn ban in effect statewide through the end of September for outdoor burning, et cetera, et cetera. So you can get information. The governor's office has put information out there. So I just mentioned that it is a very dry season and a heightened state of fire danger. So the governor has made that proclamation. That's it from our report, Mayor and Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sugg. Council Member Pro Tem Lee, do you have any comments or report outs at this time?
Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, yes, I have one comment for our registered voters here in University Place. This last weekend, you received your ballot. When you opened it, you weren't overwhelmed with the writing on it because there's only three people on it. But it's important. It's for a school board position. The school board is important to our educational system because they approve the budget and they also approve the educational course that is taken by our school district. Be an informed voter. You can go to your Pierce County registered voter pamphlet, which provides candidate supplied information, or you can go to the internet and Google the candidate's name and receive independent information. Anyway, the important thing is to be informed and to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pro Tem Lee. Councilmember McCluskey, do you have any report outs or comments at this time?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor Bellici. On July 15th, I went to the PCRC meeting and a report out from the SHAPE consultants were there. Apparently the county has hired 2 consultants. They've been working quite hard and diligently on getting this designed as much as they can, because as we all know that the total design and impetus will come once the board starts to meet. SHAPE is also in the countywide planning policies as well. And so there was quite a discussion and concern over that, especially by the town of Steilacoom, the city of Fircrest, which has similar concerns as to city of University Place in regards to what are we really buying into? What are we really getting? What are the real outcomes? And so the consultants reaffirmed that the intention was not to add another layer of government, but it seems to be going down that bunny trail, which is disconcerting. And if you're not on the train or the bus, then you're out, and you probably will have to follow some of these probably unfunded mandates that would be coming down the chute, possibly. Just depends on what the board decides to look at it. Each member will have 1 vote, and that vote will count. So a jurisdiction, a city such as ours, when you have a rep on this board, it's leveraging the city towards something. So that's disconcerting for a couple other towns as well. It's not, the intent is not to usurp any authority. And of course, it's strictly voluntary. You don't have to follow their mandates, but it's kind of looking like with the county-wide planning policies that there are some built-in policies and mandates that will dovetail into the SHAPE board. So that is to be discussed. Hopefully, I think Mayor Bellici has that coming back to us for a more detailed discussion. So I forwarded the town of Steilacoom's comments to everyone, and also the city of Fircrest didn't have any written reports, but they have similar concerns as that, and especially with some of in the countywide planning policies with some of the shoulds and the shalls, and and some of the definitions in that didn't quite line up. And for example, what is defined as an underserved population that needs to be identified and defined. So, and we all know the details about the 1.5 full-time equivalency commitment, which it seems will be a little more than that. And the dollars are based on population, and those who sign up for the board as well will impact the amount that each city or town will pay. So some of the countywide planning policies, we were talking about the climate change section in that is being further defined. And also in that is is that some of the drivers of the climate change may not be designed into this chapter in the countywide planning policies in regards to the accessibility and the needs to be addressed, such as wages and credit scores and things of that nature that could impact affordability, attainability, and accessibility of the housing. And so there is some ambiguous ADA requirements in that as well, and that could lead to potential lawsuits. So that was a concern, especially of the town of Steilacoom. So I think once we get the countywide planning plan updates, we will really need to look at that with discernment, and also we'll look at that in the details and to get into that as to actually what that all means and how that will impact our citizens in the city of UP. There was a report out from the Puyallup White River Local Integrating Organization. They have a little over $30 million in funding for ecosystem recovery projects, watershed, urban forest, and so we have any of those projects, we may want to reach out to them because they have money and they're looking at projects to fund. There was also a discussion in regards to getting our carbon vehicles into more of the electric mode, that's more eco-friendly. And however, our electrical grid system is not at this time able to support it. So they're looking at how to grow that support for that power uptick when that occurs, and looking at the hydro stations as well, and also looking at the transportation impact fees, seeing where they can drive more dollars, and for the eco vehicles that are on the road now that are not paying for the roads, looking at that aspect. So, and how to get the gas-powered cars off the road in a timely manner, if that's so all those were kind of played around on a certain very soft level. No decision, no direction was made on that. And I will conclude my report for the PCRC until next time. And there's no report out from the Zoutrekk Authority. They are meeting in September.
Thank you, Councilmember McCluskey. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, do you have any report outs or comments at this time?
I no report outs right now, and just one comment just to follow Councilmember McCluskey's comments, which I appreciated, and I always enjoy hearing the details of those meetings that I'm not at, so that's helpful. There was one bit of information that I wasn't too certain about, and that is just be aware of. Electric vehicles pay an annual additional fee in their in their licensing, and that's about $150 or so, and it's designed to be about equal to what they would pay in the average gas tax as an offset. It's not as widely known as perhaps people need it to be, but I wanted to throw it out there because it's wanted to get the information a little more complete on the other side of that. But thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Well, I wanted to announce that since we have opened up as in this county and in this state, we have managed to get some events going. One of them is will be taking place this Wednesday, July 21st in our atrium. It'll be jazz in the atrium from 12:30 to 1:30, and that will be going on through August 25th. So if you have a lunch hour and you would like to come and enjoy some music and hopefully some nice weather to be able to also sit outside the atrium and listen, please come and take your lunch from one of our restaurants here in the town center square and reconnect with your neighbors. Also, Music on the Square, our evening performance that we had last year, our first is happening again. It's August 4th from 6 to 8 p.m. So again, it's an opportunity to come and have a nice dinner, enjoy some good music, and reconnect with your neighbors. So please mark your calendar for those events. We do have a new business opening up in the Green First Complex. They will be having their grand opening and ribbon cutting on July 26th in the evening. Come and welcome the new Wild Birds Unlimited store into our neighborhood and see what all you can get to beef up those gardens that everybody's been working on this past year and a half during the shutdown, and make the birds happy. And then also for families, August 7th is Movie in the Park at Cirque Park, starting at 7:30. So bring your picnic dinner, your chairs and your blankets, and come out and enjoy a nice movie under the stars on August 7th. Also, as council has noticed that the agenda has been rather light lately, it's because staff has been transitioning into getting back into work mode and into the office. I wanted to, by a nod of heads, see if there was any interest in canceling our August 2nd meeting. There's only 3 items on the agenda. We could move those to the 16th and add some additional things and make a more beefy agenda on the 16th of August and have a day off on August 2nd. Do I have any objections from council to canceling our August 2nd meeting? Oh, I'm not seeing anybody rushing to it, so I would assume by consent that you are in favor of doing so. So we will be canceling our August 2nd meeting and have a robust meeting on the 16th. So be prepared, it may be a late night that night. Okay, at this time, our council comments and city manager report is done, so we will move on to our study session, and it's our fireworks review. And with that, I'm going to ask our attorney, Matt Kaiser, our police chief, Greg Primo, and our public safety administrator, Jennifer Hales, all to come on and provide the material for our study this evening.
And good evening, council. We're joined for our annual or near annual discussion on fireworks. This will be a presentation sort of in 3 parts. What we want to do for council is, first of all, just give you, the generic lay of the land with what the code has in place, talk about some of the operational components. Second, talk about specific with the fireworks season in 2021, what we saw, what we didn't see, things that worked, things that didn't work. And then third part of the language in the fireworks code, this is actually the last year for which there's actually the regulatory requirement. That's not to say we won't continue to do it, but to identify and offer up potential changes to the code for council, if that's something that council wants to discuss, evaluate, and so on and so forth. So that, let me kind of jump into the first part of this. I think, as council may recall, or may still otherwise be recovering from, back in 2018, Council had a series of fairly robust discussions, which culminated in probably the most substantial changes to our fireworks code since incorporation. That was in response to long-term community concerns issues. As council may also recall, there was the only citizen advisory vote in the city's history at that point, where a number of citizens had expressed a desire for increased enforcement and such. What council did was it did a number of things, and we've identified for this in the accompanying study session memo, was we looked at, first of all, are there areas for which there are appropriate restrictions for the discharge? Council ultimately passed legislation that curtailed some fireworks restrictions, but still allowing some fireworks to go forward. The dates and times of operation had not changed. Also addressing the issue of sales. Sales under the revised code had been limited. Previously, sales were generally allowed. Sales under the new code were limited to nonprofit organizations and then selling only those fireworks which were legal for discharge within the city. The third thing that we also looked at was looking at the enforcement piece. And part of the enforcement piece was really focused in two general areas. One is how can we enforce this smarter? Looking at those areas for which officers and deputies in the field had related concerns and some of the citizen concerns. And we imposed restrictions on not just simply the discharge, but also holding property owners responsible if they knowingly allow discharge in contravention of our rules, and addressing litter related constraints, addressing those day after concerns where you saw the fireworks debris on the road, that sort of thing. The other thing that we did was we modified the penalties associated with fireworks violations. Previously, those violations had been criminal in nature, which would require somebody to go to jail. If they couldn't afford counsel, counsel was appointed and with a lengthy process. Made that an infraction with a base penalty of $250 with fees, costs, and assessments that puts the total fine amount over $500. And so that's been sort of the generic lay of the land over the course of the last 5 years. A large part of that, since the fireworks regulations went into effect, those regulations didn't go into effect simply in a vacuum. There's been a fair amount of community outreach, education, and general discussion. And for that, I'll turn it over to Jennifer Harris as well as Chief Greg Primo to talk about that component.
You want me to go first, Jennifer?
Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Greg Primo, your Chief of Police here. I was just going to do a quick kind of overview of our calls for service for the 4th of July and the time around that. In your council packet, you can see that you have a chart with a running tally of what looks like 21 years of calls for service related to fireworks in the city. And on a positive note, for those that are not fond of fireworks, you can see that we had our lowest number of complaints, which I hope correlates to a lower number of discharges and parties associated with fireworks for this year. We had a total of 33 complaints over the span from the 28th to the 5th, which again is lower than last year at 44, when we were really in the height of a COVID kind of shutdown. So I know for me, I was anticipating a much busier 4th of July in terms of, just coming out of the restrictions from the pandemic. And I think we fared pretty well with the handful of residents that I talked to. I think a lot of people expressed that things were pretty quiet leading up to the 4th. The 4th was a little bit noisy that day, but was still pretty respectful in terms of following at least the timeline that the council had for the ordinance. And it continued on. As you can see, on the 5th, we only had 2 complaints, so it seemed to be pretty isolated to that time. Also, just in addition to that, West Pierce Fire reported 0 incidents related to fireworks in the city of University Place, and I think they had 14 down in Lakewood, but nothing in the city of University Place, which is also a positive thing for us. As far as that was pretty much the statistics piece, and I don't know at what point we'll open it up, but I'll be here for questions if those come up. I'll hand it off to Jennifer.
Good evening. I don't have much to add to Chief Primo's comments. Obviously, we start early. We try to start first part of June. Linda and her team, Amanda, pushing out messaging on the ordinance and then making sure that folks in the community are aware of the provisions of the ordinance and reminding them, particularly if we have no stands in University Place, that they will need to be educated as they go into other cities to buy fireworks, making sure that they know what is legal to discharge in University Place. This year, we did launch a Code Red message. I'm sure you all are aware. We have launched Code Red messages in the past during dry seasons, and there was such discussions from the fire districts in the county about the concern for fire that we felt like we really should let the residents know the recommendations. And I didn't get any feedback back on that from the community, which I consider to be a good thing because people generally won't call and tell me thank you. They mostly will call and complain about that sort of thing. So I consider that to be good. And as I mentioned before, the calls reflect that nuisance calls were down this year. So that's all I have for now, and I'll be here for questions also.
And then let me just kind of wrap it up. Before we get to questions, part of the legislation that council drafted also identified other areas for changes, improvements, modifications, etc. to the legislation. And I kind of want to put this in sort of a big picture Goldilocks context. You know, as council may recall, when the legislation was initially discussed, there were those that thought it was too lenient. There were those that thought it was too strict. And then there are those that would say it's just right. Without evaluating the heat of the porridge in this particular instance, what we did, at least in terms of between community comments and council comments, as we've been listening to council meetings, council comments, and that sort of thing, we identified 4 different areas, at least for council general discussion. And those were identified in the study session memo. Let me just briefly run through those. The first is whether council wanted to revisit the sales provision. Has noted that sales, the ability to sell is limited to nonprofit organizations. I think as you can see from the numbers, since the legislation went into effect, we've had 1 application for a fireworks stand. That location did not open. So in light of the numbers, whether there's a basis to make a change there or leave it as is, we'll leave that for council discussion. The second, piggybacking off one thing that Jennifer just talked about with the Code Red, obviously we had the heat emergency and the heat concerns this year. Our code does not have language in there that allows for the imposition of emergency type restrictions in there. Some codes do. It is not something that I have seen in a lot of codes, but it's obviously something this year that got a lot of attention. There are some models out there. If that's something that council wanted to go around, we can talk about a little bit further, but I don't want to talk about it quite up front unless there's interest to talk about that more. The third is we did catch something related to juveniles. Our current code prohibits juvenile or from parents allowing juvenile discharge. The old code had it under parental supervision. Whether that's a drafting error or an intended issue, we'll leave that for council to discuss. And then the fourth is the discussion, you know, where do we want to go, you know, fireworks in the future. So with that, I'll do a final check-in here with Jennifer and the chief. And barring anything else, turn it back to council for further discussion.
Okay. All right. Are there any questions or comments from council? Please raise your hand. Council Member McCluskey and followed by Council Member Keel.
Thank you, Mayor Belisi. I would be interested in looking at the modification to the minor relator fireworks discharge. You know, that discussion. The other part is that number 2, the authorization for emergency restrictions. I remember going down to Olympia and testifying along with our fire department to get this implemented on the state level, and it didn't get out of committee. So, but that was a few years back. And I don't know if that has changed because we needed to change it on the state level for the cities to do an emergency ban in regards to fireworks. So do you have any updates?
We did look at that in terms of state legislation, and we didn't see any recent changes in the state legislation that touched on that issue. When we had some of those inquiries come in, you know, we floated a query off to the state fire marshal's office in terms of what authority, and they said, well, either you take it at the local level or maybe the governor will do an emergency declaration. Well, he didn't do the emergency declaration on that. So, you know, you're back at the local level. You know, and there's a couple different models that are out there. You know, there's obviously the model where there is no code and you rely on your general declaration of emergency authority, which under our code, the manager declares, council confirms after the fact. That's there, but you know, you're always looking at the confirmation after the fact. One of the other models that are out there is typically a responsible fire official will certify that there is a fire type emergency, and then either a chief administrative officer like the city manager or a council would say, yes, that's what we want to do. And Pierce County has something of a very similar model, but you may also recall a similar proposal was run through the county council under their code. They viewed it as an emergency ordinance, which required a supermajority vote, which they failed to obtain. Not every council has that. But there are models that are very similar to that, you know, and then you still have to decide who does it. Is it an administrative officer? Is it the elected body? The challenge, obviously, with an elected body is with this city council, you got to declare a special meeting, most likely the way the timing all works out with the 24-hour notice and whatnot. Simultaneously, you got a flip circumstance. Do you want to ratify it after the fact? You know, where's council's comfort level if that's something that you're interested in? Particularly relying on a certification from a fire official or something like that with other public safety input. So it's there. The final challenge associated with that is if you bake it into your fireworks code, you do have a 1-year lead time before those restrictions, if they're more restrictive than state law, will kick in. So the recommendation is if you were to do that, you know, that wouldn't come into effect until what, the 2023 fire season. You know, but then you could theoretically pull the trigger if you needed to on fairly short notice. And then the final challenge, and I'll be quiet at least on this point, is to make sure that if you're going to do that, is to ensure that the conditions or the requirements are particular to that time, rather than a policy, you know, yay fireworks, nay fireworks. But there's something about what's going on right now that requires that action. So hopefully that answers your question.
I think you did. I think you indicated that the state didn't really have to do anything for the city to do an emergency ban. We just need to get it into an ordinance in order for us to implement that. And I would be in favor of discussing that. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Keel, followed by Mayor Pro Tem Worthington.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Jennifer, Chief, and Matt, thank you for your report. I would agree. Of the 32 years that I've lived in, 33 years now, I've lived in this city, it was the quietest end-to-end 4th of July that I've heard and been around, and that was good. And I like your analogy, Matt, of the Goldilocks thing. So I think we did hit a just right kind of a moment. I was curious about two things. One is the fact that we had no one selling fireworks in our city. I think that was a first for me, and I'm wondering if there's any kind of intel as to how and why that happened. And then two, I'm wondering if I saw the report about the calls and all that kind of stuff like that, but typically what has happened in the past is that no matter what we have on the books, if there's one little bang, there's like 15 people calling in saying, hey, I heard fireworks, you know, go do something about that. And I was wondering, was there any activity like that going on? Because to me, that's another indication of Goldilocks, right? So if those were down, you know that might be helpful. So I'm wondering about that, and I'll take the answer. Then I got one more question I want to ask.
I'll talk about the calls really quick. Looking at, so we had, I think it was 23 calls on July 4th. And I know the Mayor Pro Tem actually was out riding along with one of our officers and could probably provide a little bit more of a firsthand experience on that evening. But yeah, so about 15 or so. So the vast majority of the complaints that we get are your typical, I can hear fireworks somewhere in the area. There wasn't a specific complaint of an address or identifying a particular intersection or whatnot. So, and that's pretty typical, right? So that's the majority of the type of complaints we get. And I think you could even show that some of those might not even be in the city of University Place. Some of these fireworks that we get are so loud, you can hear them from a half mile away, no problem. So, but we did respond and make contact on several of the other ones that we had some identification of an area, and officers did make contact with people. And in my conversations with them, the majority of them were, not large parties. It was either one family or a small group of a cul-de-sac that was out discharging something that they said they didn't realize that was not within the ordinance, and were very cooperative. We didn't have, other than one incident at 27th and Grandview that was very much a large gathering of people in a parking lot. It was not their, obviously their property, bringing in illegal fireworks according to our ordinance. That was a little bit of a challenging for the officers that were working. But again, back to your question, the majority are those kind of I can hear it somewhere in the area type of complaints, and not a direct location or anything like that.
And I could probably answer the permit question, Councilmember Keel. I think that the limitation on what they can sell is a turnoff to many people seeking the permit. Yeah, they would rather sell the full meal deal because a lot of them, that's their revenue for the entire year. And I also want to tag on to Chief Primo's comments. Believe it or not, I get a lot of calls before 4th of July asking me what's legal, which is always so nice because people are taking the time to call and kind of walk through what they can purchase. So in addition to all the information that we push out, we can share that information on the website. People do call in to check before they buy. So
yeah, that was great. And that's what I had anticipated by the permits, no one coming in. So like I can't make any money off of this, which is understandable. So the one comment I had to follow up was discussion about, to Councilman McCluskey's comment about looking at ordinances and other kind of focuses from the state level. I would just offer to you that if you got some ideas around that, to leverage AWC, we've got a legislative committee that has been very successful, particularly last year and the years before, when AWC gets coalesced behind an issue. They're very good at lobbying the state legislature and getting things done. I mean, I would point to all the police reforms and things like that has happened this past year, to include tax increment financing. I mean, how long have we been trying to get that done? Right, and so that was done. So leverage that group. That would, I think, help get you down the road.
Yeah, Councilmember Keel, I was part of that coalition with the fireworks that year. AWC led that, and they did an outstanding job. But the fireworks people were there in force, so it never made it out of the committee at that time. So anyway, yeah, they're definitely a good resource.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington. You are muted, sir.
There, just in time to hear the cough. Anyhow, thank you, Mayor. So I wanted to make a few comments. Excuse me, clear my throat too. Too much smoke in the air. No, that was a couple of weeks ago. Let me talk a little bit about fireworks that I've observed. here in University Place. For 3 of the last 4 years, I've been doing ride-alongs with our police force on the 4th of July. Would have done it last year, but ride-alongs were prohibited as an issue of COVID safety, which I appreciate. But, in any case, so I have had a chance to get some perspective on it, and it was comparatively a quiet year. The officer that I was with, I reported out earlier, I think we made some 22 fireworks contacts. Roughly half of those, somewhere between 9 and 11, were called in. The others were more direct observations. In all cases, it was an educational process, some more challenging than others. One of them was a very large gathering at 27th and Grandview, and with not a raucous party, but a variety of folks with illegal fireworks and pretty much people with station wagons, or not station wagons, excuse me, with vans and SUVs full of kids and infants in some cases. It was that kind of crowd. Nonetheless, as that group dispersed when the officers showed up, as I reported a meeting or two ago, there were a number of fires that were underway on the property, 3 by my recall, and one of which a neighboring business brought their fire extinguisher out and put it out since it was a little hard for the officers to stomp it all down at that point, but they did what they could with the other 2. So that's just a quick recap of what that was this year, and previous years it's been busy and a little more confrontational. Please don't think it wasn't busy. It was busy. It just was a bit more manageable, and I think many of the calls got answered. As the chief reported, and as his troops know very well, often we're getting calls from people that are that are a noise that's reverberating around our community, but maybe originated elsewhere. And it's important, I think, right now that we think about what's happening in the communities around us. I think that's really a key piece for us. Because there's a trend happening. We're part of that trend. We're a little bit on the bus, but not all the way. And the communities around us have, for the most part, banned fireworks outright. We're, with the exception being, Lakewood has not done that, and that's entirely their choice. Obviously, Tacoma has, and others have as well. And that's making a difference, and people are not as accustomed or expecting fireworks. They do, when they can find some place that allows it, they come in there. And I think that was the case of 27th and Grandview. In that particular case, I bet there were fewer UP residents there than people beyond our borders coming in because they thought it would be okay. I don't really think any of them were there, or at least many were there to break the law, so much as just find a place to entertain the family. And the 4th with fireworks from, for the most part, from tribal fire stands, it would seem, fireworks stands. But there were others as well, other types of fireworks there as well. Often what we saw was fireworks that were illegal here, not illegal in Lakewood, but illegal every place else. And that, I think, is part of the confusion we have. And one of the issues that I think we have in front of us is one of a situation that's easy to get confused with a myriad of different types of rules. So I just wanted to relate a little bit about the 4th and my personal experiences over the last 3 of the last 4 years. There's some good progress being made. It's not over, but I think we've made that more confusing than it needs to be. And that's led not to as simple a situation as some other places. It also means our officers are busier trying to explain the difference in UP from Tacoma, from other places around us. And that takes more time and more storytelling. I think the officers did a very good job. I saw several in action of educating people, and that was what their mission was. I'll come back to that in just a little bit. We've talked about the fire danger issue, and that's, I think, significant. And we've said this for probably 3 of the last 4 years because it's been dry conditions, some years worse than this, others a little better perhaps in terms of dry conditions. But it's the middle, or it's the beginning of summer. This year, it may have been the middle of summer. And that's a significant challenge. I sometimes think if we had the national habit of doing this on January 1st, it would be a different story, but we don't. We happen to choose it during the middle of or the beginning of our summer season when things are dry and tinder-like, and it makes little sense. So I'm certainly interested in making our community as safe as we can and from fire danger. There's some ways we can do that. But I'd be surprised just how effective that's going to be at the local level, because so far, frankly, I think very few communities have exercised any authority in an emergency situation to control fire and to limit fireworks. That's not widely done, and there may be a reason for that. The question about fireworks sales is also interesting. We allow the sale of novelty devices. We allow the sale of fountains that don't shoot above a certain height. I think it's about 4 feet or so. Maybe it's a little taller, but it's approximately that. Why? Nobody's selling these things here because they can't make any money. I think let's just get rid of the sales situation and let's just prohibit that, because it isn't necessary and it just adds further to the confusion, frankly. I think it's time for us to just put an end to those sales. This year, we had someone set up a tent ready to sell in one of our grocery store parking lots, only to discover that they were in UP. They didn't know quite where they were, apparently, because they never applied for a license, nor, of course, were they issued one. That is, I guess, very much on them, but I'd still like it to be just clean and be able to say it's not allowed, rather than, oh, you can do these 6 things, but not the other 20. That has to be a difficult message to be clear about. The other thing I wanted to get us back to was just the context of what's happening around us, because I think we have, as a community, a broader community, a Pierce County community, I think we're moving away from fireworks, and I think that's good. I think it's good because we basically have outgrown that custom. Both in terms of the densities we live in and in terms of our culture. Not entirely, not that I really want it all to go away, but I think we're headed there, and we might as well get all the way on the bus. We might as well not have one foot on it, but get on it. And there's one remaining city in our immediate area that has chosen not to, and that's their business. I'm not getting in the middle of their stuff. But as far as our stuff goes, I think we should make the steps necessary, get on the full ban to fireworks, and act like that's what we want to do, because it is. If we go back to 2018, rather, we go back to 2018 in that advisory vote, we had something like 65% of the voters saying no to fireworks. They didn't say no to these and yes to something else. They just said no to fireworks. That's, in most any other situation, that's a mandate, and we hedged on that, and so be it. But now that we've had some experience, now that we've, the ordinance we created at the time, we said let's come back and look at it, and we have, and we've been following it. I've been following it. I think let's say no. Let's just end the fireworks situation here. Get with the program with our neighbors, get fully on the bus, and move forward with that, and end sales, of course, in the course of that. Then the fireworks danger is diminished. Then the complaints ultimately are diminished. We're headed in the right direction. It's the right trend. We've started the steps, but let's get all the way on the bus and make it happen. So, no questions, but I think that was a comment. So. Thank you.
Are there any other council members that have comments or questions? Well, I do know that Mr. Kaiser did ask if we had consensus to move forward on any of the 4 items that was in his staff report. I did hear only a couple council members directly address any of those issues. I personally think that we do need to look at an option for some sort of dry weather condition situation and discuss our options, what we can and cannot do, and what would work most advantagemember for a dry situation that we might encounter in upcoming fire season. So I think I'm on board with Councilmember McCluskey in asking for that. I do think, though, the reason that we may not have heard as many fireworks this year as we have heard in prior years is because of the Code Red call. I think that had potentially a greater impact than anything that we have done in the past with the outreach. Even though we continued with the outreach, I think that Code Red and that reminder to our citizens that there were extremely dry conditions out there did lead to reduced fireworks discharge. We have surrounding jurisdictions that have fireworks bans, and let's be real, people, fireworks go off in Tacoma, they go off in Fircrest, they go off in Steilacoom. So having a ban does not guarantee that we're going to have compliance from our citizens. I think limiting the sales to those 5 items shows that these are not the novelties are not moneymaker deals, and that's why we're not getting any applications in for it. And I agree with Councilmember Worthington. The way our ordinance currently reads is very confusing to somebody that goes to a legal fireworks stand in Lakewood and wants to purchase some fireworks. They are purchasing something that's legal and allowed by the state, and we can't mandate that those tents provide the information and restrict the sales of any of the aerial fireworks. So if we're going to be real about this, we ban them, but I'm telling you, putting a banned ordinance in place isn't going to ensure compliance from our citizens. It's not going to create the quiet neighborhood that people want. However, I think we should look at using our Code Red on an annual basis as a reminder to the citizens. And maybe with enough of those warnings out there, particularly if council moves toward the direction of a total ban, maybe eventually the citizens get the clue and will stop shooting off fireworks, and we can be one of the first in the Puget Sound region that actually has a ban that citizens follow. But to go for the ban and assume that that's going to lead to silence, I think is not a realistic expectation. And a lot of citizens think when you ban things that it doesn't happen. And anyway, that's just my opinion at this point. But I do want to look at some sort of emergency provision that we can implement and consider actually putting in the ordinance a requirement to do a Code Red announcement to the citizens regarding the status of fireworks, whether they're allowed and what is allowed or what isn't allowed, or if they're not allowed at all, and see how that impacts performance and adherence to our regulation. So that was my 2 cents. I see that Councilmember Keel has raised his hand.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to since I didn't answer your question, to come back and say, yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and I agree with, I tried to agree with Councilman McCluskey about the emergency piece. I would agree with that. That would be good to have in our back pocket for emergencies, in an emergency situation. And I also agree with your comment about the ban doesn't guarantee quietness, right? And that's kind of what I was trying to allude to in my comments. And I also want to remind us, the reason why we did the novelty, we talked a lot about, as Matt told us, we talked a lot about this topic, back in 2018. And the reason why I remember we left the novelty is was for the families. So it was the parents that had small kids, that they wanted their kids to have something, right? The sparklers, the little squiggly things, and so they can do they're completely, totally safe, relative to the other stuff, but they were novelty, and it was just for those kids, so they could have the family thing, something in your driveway with small kids to do that. That's why we allowed that to happen. And I get it if a company doesn't want to sell all of those in our city, but I think the parents will do exactly what they did this year, was go someplace else and buy them and bring them home. I would also agree that it's a bit confusing, but people are smart. I think over time, and we continue to drive it home, do the code red, and we start doing things, it will get baked into, this is what we can do here, and this is what we cannot do here. So I guess I'm saying I'm not ready to just end it all. I'm just not, because I think that we need to have something for those citizens that wish to do the novelty stuff with their small kids and honor the holiday in that way. The big booms, absolutely. Let's get rid of them. Let's enforce it. Let's and the big booms have always been illegal, right? So, we just need to continue to work on that. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see Councilmember Figueroa has raised his hand. However, I do need to ask for an extension for 15 minutes to allow final comments. Do I have a motion?
Yes, Mayor Bellisi, I move that we extend for 15 minutes the council meeting this evening.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Do I have any objections? Okay, I don't see anything, so we are extended. Councilmember Figueroa.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just wanted to weigh into this study session on this, and I agree with Councilmember Kill and the mayor, and that is that I don't believe that banning everything is going to slow down the illegal activity. That's going to continue no matter what. And we did discuss this very thorough many times, and we made I believe, a very good decision to allow families to enjoy a celebration that they believe is there. It's a federal holiday and is recognized holiday for a specific reason, and is very historical and part of the culture as well. And so we decided to leave something on the table instead of taking everything away. And we made that decision, and I still will stick to that, because I think it's something that we should not just all of a sudden take away the need for to celebrate such a major holiday in our country, in our society, in our community. And I do believe, and we all believed at that time, that those are safe novelty items that are were not the issue when it came to the with our community's complaints. The complaints weren't about someone little smoker thing going down the driveway or sparkler. Nobody was complaining about that. They were complaining about the big noises and all the rockets that were going up and going into the roofs. And so will they stop? No. Will that be diminished? Yes, I think we did. I think we did a very good job on doing what we're doing. As far as being complicated, I don't think so. People deal with complicated things all the time. For us to say that this is such a complicated ordinance, I don't buy that, because this families and people deal with other complicated situations all the time. So this is not that complicated, and it's really just ends up with those that want to obey the law and those that don't want to obey the law, and that's it. But I'm not really convinced that we should be. Yes, that was 65% that said ban, but we still have a minority, a loud minority of 40 percent that wanted something. And I really don't believe that 65% said ban because they were frustrated, just like I was. Many of us were, about the loud noises and things like that. But a lot of those were already illegal, even before we did our ban on those things. So yeah, I like to keep that as well. As far as to sell, though, I do believe that Councilmember Worthington has a point, and that is that it is. I don't think that anyone is going to really put up sales tent and do the permitting for the novelty items, and they're available nearby for those families that want to have those. And I think that that's something that I would support, and I would support the Emergency Act, but I'm not in support of banning everything. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Figueroa. Councilmember Pro Tem Lee, you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Pro Tem Lee. I understand all the comments that my colleagues have made, and I agree probably with all of them, but I still have to go back to the vote. We put this issue on the ballot. It was voted on, and whether you want to dissect this vote to determine that the minority have something to say or the majority, the fact is that there was a majority that said no fireworks, not some fireworks, but no fireworks. So I still have to go back to the fact that we represent our constituents, the citizens of this city, and they have said that they do not want fireworks. So that's my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Worthington, you have your hands up and you have about 5 minutes.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. And so just a couple of things in response, and thank you. I've been listening to everybody's comments and all. I think it's been a while since we talked about this, probably about 2018 or so. But any case, we saved this subject specifically for now, when we've had some history of how it was going. So here we are. Just to be clear, too, I have no expectation that banning fireworks will make this community silent on the 4th of July. That's not in my dreams. It is, though, hopeful that we can make it quieter and more compliant with the law. And I think by being able to have something that's quicker for the public to understand, they're capable of understanding complex things. Admittedly, no question about that. But our officers spend a lot of time explaining the difference of fireworks, and the public will come away in the course of that conversation looking a bit confused. The officer does a good job at it, but it takes a lot of their time talking about different fireworks. It is a much cleaner, clearer, and more straightforward message to say fireworks are banned. Now, the state law makes a distinction between fireworks and novelties. And novelties are just fine in the state law and just fine in my mind. I'm not talking about novelties, I'm talking about fireworks. And the state is the one that defines it. I'm not trying to muddle that definition. If anything, I'm trying to clarify the definition so that we match it. That's a move to make this a bit simpler. It will actually end up, I believe, consuming less officer time for enforcement because we don't have to try and explain what the difference is when they're on the street and working with them. I appreciate that there's interest in stopping sales, and I hope we can move forward with that. I've heard your comments. I respect a variety of different viewpoints. That's how it all works. And I can still count to 7 or 3 or 4 or 2. Not that much of an issue. But if we are going to count any more, now's the time to get it figured out while there's a couple of minutes left on the clock. So I think I probably have said my bit. I appreciate a chance to share those thoughts, and I hope we all can just make this a bit better for our UP community on the 4th of July.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I do agree that we need to clarify the language, because when we advertised to the community that the hours for fireworks discharge was for 9 a.m. to midnight on July 4th, and then the next bullet point mentions, oh, but it's novelties that are allowed and not aerial fireworks, it does get confusing to the citizens, because to them, fireworks are fireworks. If we say fireworks are not allowed, but you can do novelties, that's a different message that you send to the public. And I do think that we need to clarify our ordinance language in that respect, to make it clearer to the citizens, because you go to a fireworks tent and you're enticed with fireworks and you're not it's an innocent mistake that citizens are making. They're buying what they see as legitimately licensed by the state, but may not fall under the novelty category. So I think we can look at clarifying our language and the way we educate our citizens to that. So when we say discharge is allowed, we don't say discharge of fireworks is allowed from this time frame, but discharge of novelties is allowed, no fireworks. And maybe that will help clarify the language. So I would be interested in looking at that rework, or that rewording of the ordinance. Okay, it appears that everybody has had an opportunity to speak. Has Mr. Kaiser gotten the information needed to move this item forward?
We will put together likely a couple of various configurations of that for further discussion.
All righty, that sounds good. Okay, so it appears there's no further items on this final agenda item. So with that, I will call this meeting adjourned. Good evening.
Thank you all.